So once again, my name is Jay Nakashima, and along with the coordinating committee, as well as the board, I share responsibility for the eHealth Exchange. And a year ago, at the first annual Sequoia Project meeting, I sat in the audience, like many of you, as a participant. So I do feel that I've walked in your shoes. I remember lots of days where I felt like I was crawling in your shoes, but there were also days where we were able to sprint and get things done quickly. So I do believe that I share many of your concerns. You know, I remember, constantly worrying and thinking about breaches, and did we have enough network coverage, and did we have enough user adoption? Did the clinicians have time and find time and make time to use data available via data exchange? And in my mind, that's one of the biggest hurdles that we face is changing the culture and the standard of care. So I also want to thank Dawn Van Dyke for arranging all this. She does this almost single-handedly. Yeah. Now, above and beyond your time away today, and I think we have, I'm confident that we have topics that are really going to make this worth your while. Some of you are also attending tomorrow's Sequoia Project annual meeting. And if you're not aware of that, not registered, and you are able to attend, it's tomorrow morning. And out at the registration desk, they can get you hooked up. Don Rucker from ONC is going to be providing the keynote, and we'll have a much bigger room where you won't be quite as cozy with your neighbors. And then some of you are also planning to attend the Care Equality meeting tomorrow afternoon and Friday morning. And of course, that's a meeting for those of you who are already Care Equality connections. So our goal for today is to really come together as a community, to share our best practices and to make sure that we're all on the same page and headed in the right direction. I think we can also get some takeaways today about what motivates other participants with whom we exchange, and so that we can better understand them and work with them. And then personally, I'm really hoping that that everyone here walks away with a good understanding of just how committed the folks at the Sequoia Project and eHealth Exchange are, not only to your success, but also to the improvement of patient care via interoperability. So please feel free to ask questions and engage. After all or most of our speaker sessions today, we will have an open mic where you can ask questions, and we certainly encourage that. So again, this is the first ever eHealth Exchange annual meeting. Hopefully we'll have them, or I plan to have them in future years. So if you were to take a look back at memory lane back to 10 years ago, and I was thinking about this last night, and where was I 10 years ago? 10 years ago when the 10 years ago, the eHealth Exchange was still an initiative that was being incubated or piloted by CMS and ONC. So it wasn't yet a standalone organization. And ballpark 10 years ago, it had about 4 participants. So off the top of my head, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about Kaiser, Med Virginia, I think the SSA, and probably the VA. And today we now, instead of 4, we now have 250 some participants. So it's grown significantly. In fact, it's grown just in terms of participants. It's about doubled in the past year and a half. And so, when I also think about 10 years ago, meaningful use wasn't there, and I was actively installing EHRs in hospitals across the country. And in most of the case, I was replacing paper. and we were installing EHRs, but the reality was it was very spotty. So there certainly wasn't the terminology to exchange rapidly. And it was spotty in that, we might install documentation or med administration or CPOE, computerized physician order entry. But it might have been it might have been just in the labor and delivery area, or it might have been in med surg on the first floor. But it certainly was rarely company-wide. And so data certainly was not being exchanged 10 years ago. Of course, there were a few lab results going around, primarily from reference labs to hospitals and physician practices, but there was a tremendous number of faxes going around. And if you compare that to today, we estimate that we have over 250 million clinical documents moving around the eHealth exchange every year. And that's a huge tribute to the folks in this room. Again, if you were to look at us now, and could we go to the next slide, please? Or is that me? Thank you. If we were to go to the next slide, again, we now have 250 participants. We've come a long way from those 4 that we started with 9 or 10 years ago. So we have 70,000 medical groups. We have 75% of the U.S. hospitals, all 4 federal agencies. We have over 60 state and regional HIEs, 75% of the hospitals, 3,500 dialysis clinics, 8,400 retail pharmacy centers, and we have a tremendous number of prospects. So you certainly have a tremendous amount of self-congratulations to do. So congratulations to all of you. So you have certainly created something unique. This is the only public-private collaborative in the U.S., certainly of this magnitude, certainly that's sharing over 200 medical records each year. And it's something special. It's, again, it's not to be recreated. We've got a group of fairly different providers and federal agencies who've all agreed to share medical records, patient histories and other information simply to improve patient care. So you don't spend time worrying about, hey, is my competitor going to get my information? You certainly worry about regulation. You worry about breaches. And you don't think about financial ROI. When you think about ROI, you're thinking about it primarily in terms of patient improvement. So you exchange simply because it's the right thing to do. And again, that is something very unique and very special. Next slide, please. So you may have received a bunch of emails over the past summer, which you may or may not have paid attention to, but they all involve our corporate structure. So our board, our Healthy Way board, a number of months ago decided that it would make sense to strategically align our corporate structure with our various initiatives. And it's primarily because those strategic initiatives have been going through so much growth. And we have completed this restructure. So we now have, for what it's worth, and you may or may not have a tremendous amount of interest in this, but to be transparent, I do want to stress that we have 3 separate organizations, all still nonprofit corporations, and we do an amazing job of really operating separately. Where appropriate, so that we can keep, so that we don't have any inappropriate sharing and over collaboration. So the Sequoia Project is our strategic entity focusing on public-private collaboration. So they really convene the groups, identify and tackle areas of data exchange impediments and solve those issues. Then, of course, we have Care Equality, which does a fantastic job of connecting various health information networks. So again, if you have a provider who's in the, let's say at the Commonwealth network, and they need to exchange information with a provider who's in the Athena Net network, Care Equality is the framework that makes that happen. And of course, we are the eHealth Exchange who provide operations for our health information network. So next slide, please. One more, please. So we have our coordinating committee. This is the group that has responsibility for the network. They create all the policies and procedures that Jen and myself help implement and operate. So they are the eyes and the ears, the folks on the ground who see what needs to be done with the network and makes it happen. So could I get the coordinating committee folks to stand up for a moment, please? All right, thank you. Big round of applause. And I might also provide a special thanks to John Kansky and Matt Eisenborberg. They provide even more time than the rest of the coordinating committee, and it's not an easy job. They come prepared and meet with us frequently and provide their advice and guidance. So thank you, John and Matt. So next, I'd like to call up John Kansky. John is the chair of the coordinating committee, and he's going to provide us some words of wisdom about health information exchange and the eHealth Exchange network.
It's actually John Kanskashima, but that's okay. All right, next slide, please. So Jay also misrepresented the truth. Being on the coordinating committee is actually not that hard because Jay and Jen do such an amazing job of preparing us and teeing up the information so that we just need to think and discuss and debate and decide. So a little bit about the coordinating committee is that kind of what we do and how it works because we in no way want the eHealth Exchange to be mysterious, and I don't know if you encounter this, but sometimes when you're talking to your peers or explaining participation in the eHealth Exchange, it's of everyone's benefit to understand how this works. So the coordinating committee is the governing body for the network. And so we govern policy and we have oversight over the kind of network and rules of the road and conformance by the members. And we have monthly meetings and all new participants are approved, and if there's ever any bumps in the road of organizations getting on, we kind of orchestrate or adjudicate the membership. When there's DIRSA changes and things like that, the coordinating committee is the body that kind of governs and directs the network. I wanted to stress that given the change in structure that Jay was explaining, that in no way changes the role of the coordinating committee as the governing body of eHealth Exchange. Next slide, please. So one of the themes that want to encourage discussion and understanding around is the fact that, you referenced the early history of the eHealth Exchange and the federal partners and treatment use cases. There's a number of additional use cases that have been approved by the coordinating committee over the years, and some of which are in stages of use and implementation, and some of which have been approved, kind of awaiting demand for those services. The point on the bottom is an important one, which is when these use cases are brought into use or into being is driven by the participant demand. So if there's things that your organization would like to, you see things on it, so I didn't know I could do that on the eHealth Exchange, or is that a current use case, or how can I help will that into being? Those are all good questions for the for today's event. Next slide. So from time to time, ad hoc, there are work groups that you can participate in. The newest work group that's been formed is the Purpose of Use work group. It's focused on sort of the, well, we have all these use cases. How can we encourage more use cases on the eHealth Exchange? What barriers may there be? And the work group started with exploring sort of the guardrails that are represented by the different regulations. Just wanted to make sure that as participants you are aware that A, there's work groups, B, you can participate, C, here's one, and they're working on diversifying the use cases on the eHealth Exchange. Representation on this work group includes health systems, health plans, HIEs, relevant vendors, federal agencies, as you might expect. Next slide, please. There's also, hopefully most of you are aware, monthly participant calls. That's where you get updates on kind of the what's going on of eHealth Exchange, including any new members or changes in operating policies. And this is another opportunity to kind of engage in the eHealth Exchange. I wrote down a little note to tell my story. My story goes something like, our organization was participating in the eHealth Exchange, but I just kind of wanted to understand it more deeply, so I sought out participation in the coordinating committee, and you hang around there for a while, and you miss one meeting and you're the chair. That's not exactly how it happened. But point being, I just represent an organization that participates in the exchange, and it was a great way to learn more was by getting more engaged in how this thing works. Next slide, please. Here we are, first annual meeting, and it's good size. I kind of like the coziness, and it's a good opportunity to discuss. I've already had some great conversations and got some questions answered and thought about 6 more I want to ask of my peers. So if you see me coming and you don't want to talk to me, just walk the other way. But looking forward to engaging with you, and hopefully you'll take away some great stuff from the agenda. There's some good operational, practical information about participation in eHealth Exchange. Okay, next slide. Is there a next slide? All right, so with that, I wanted to introduce the next panel. You can't see them, but there are 4 chairs on this stage. I don't know if anybody will get this joke, but did we get these from Wonder Woman, or? And then, since I'm on a roll, I'll go so far as to say you would be able to see them, but they took all the cushions off and made a collage out of them. So. All right, that's all I got. But this panel includes HIEs, providers, health plans, and we're talking about emerging use cases and maximizing connectivity over the eHealth Exchange. So, thank you.